Good morning, Chairman. We're now live.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone present in the chamber and those listening online to the Business of the Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Mike Brooks and I am Chairman of this committee. Councillor Alex Hall, Vice Chairman of the committee, is also in attendance on my right here. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. There is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the Council chamber through the rear doors and leave the building through the reception and assemble in the front car park and await further instructions. Can I request everyone present to ensure your mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting? May I remind you that the hearing loop is now activated. Requests to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman, Alex Hall, and we will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. However, I will close down the debate to ensure we keep time. Therefore, I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise, and also ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. We will now move into the formal agenda. And item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence and replacement members. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Vernon, Councillor Strengle, Councillor Gibson and Councillor Davies today.
Thank you. Right, we move on to item 2 then, declarations of members' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests. Do members wish to declare any? No, so no interest to declare there that are not already on the DPI forms. I'll move on then to item 3 on the agenda, and this item is the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2023. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Please turn to pages 5 to 14. And I will just go through them a page at a time in case any members want to raise, or anyone wants to raise, a point of accuracy of the minutes. So I'll just go through those. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and page 13. Do I have a proposer to propose those minutes as a correct record of the last meeting? Proposed, Councillor Stokes. Seconded, Councillor Hall. Thank you. So I will now take a vote on that. With all those in favour of those minutes, that's correct. Thank you. Anyone against? One. Any abstentions? One abstention. Councillor Wright, and that would be because you weren't at the last meeting. Thank you. Right, so thank you. The minutes are agreed as a correct record, therefore. We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I have no announcements this morning, and we have a busy agenda as always with 3 pre-decision items to consider. Therefore, I should like to ask officers presenting reports to take these as read by members and only summarise key points and the type of input expected by the committee. Introductions of reports will be capped at 5 minutes to ensure we have sufficient time to consider and debate. And I'll move on now. Have we any executive councillor announcements? No executive councillor announcements. And finally, I've got, are there any senior officer announcements? No senior officer announcements. So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda then, which is item 5, and that is item 5 is the revenue and capital budget proposals for 2024-2025. And this pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 15 to 22 of the agenda pack. The report allows the committee to provide input on the budget proposals for the upcoming financial year 2024-25, with a specific focus on the budget implications for highways and transport. The executive is scheduled to review the report on the 6th of February. It is asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support the proposed revenue and capital budget proposals for 2024-25 to the executive as set out in the report, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the executive in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Michelle Grady, Assistant Director, Finance. Michelle, over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, as you've said, this is the scrutiny of the Executive's proposals for our budget for 24-25. The budget that was put forward at the Executive meeting was in line with previous indications, and it brought together the conclusion of the announcements by the government before Christmas in its autumn budget and its provisional settlement to us. We also had the announcement of the National Living Wage uplift, which was higher than we expected, and the budget that was presented to Executive effectively had a deficit budget showing for 24-25. It was in that context that the Executive decided to promote or suggest that they wanted to accept the 4.99% increase in council tax as a basis of consultation, on the basis that it was required to meet the future demand of our services to ensure that our services could continue. It's probably worth noting that the government did make some announcements last week around additional money that it was making for government, I think on the back of some of the representations that have been made by MPs around the settlement position. Whilst we're waiting for those figures, we pretty have an idea about what they will be, but it's probably fair to say that these are one-year announcements, one-year budget announcements, so we're still pressing ahead with the recommendation of 4.99% increase on that basis, but clearly will be debated at Council. So the changes specific to this scrutiny committee are set out in paragraph 2.2 for the revenue proposals. This includes budget pressures of 6.2 million and savings of 2.5 million. The main changes being on education transport in relating to cost and demand, and on the highways contract in terms of contract inflation. The savings relate to reduced electricity prices for street lighting and process efficiency gains when dealing with third-party claims. It's probably also worth noting that on the education transport budget, there'll be a further movement of contingency that we've been using in year to meet the cost and demand of that service. The report also sets out additions to the capital programme, which in relation to this committee, there's a further programme of LED swap out, which was announced by the Executive before Christmas. And no further comments from me, Chairman. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Michelle. Right, I'll open it up for questions from Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Michelle. Reading the papers, I come up with a question that recently in 2021-22, the government cut the budget for the highways by 12 million. There was a campaign by the council where it said, you know, and the council gave us all these cards where it said, join our fight to have the government reinstate the 12 million that was cut from our road budget grant 2021-22. Has that percentage been put back into the budget? Are we still at the same level as we was then?
Michelle.
So the council made a decision to put back the 12 million based on local taxation after that cut was made, and the council tax level reflected that, so that the budget was made back up to the level it was before the DFT made that cut. I think it's fair to say that they've made some announcements in the autumn budget to put back some of that. The DFT have made some announcements to put back some of that budget, but not to the level of 12 million. I think the announcement in the autumn statement was for around 5 million.
Yes, Councillor Clark, you wish to come back?
Yeah, so following that, we're not at the level we was before 2021-22. And the other question I've got is the £4 million that's been put into for the floods. It was stated to design, plan, etc. Is 4 million enough? And where did that actual figure come from?
Michelle?
So the executive, as part of its review of the Q2 position for the current year, identified that we got some underspends within the current year's budget that allowed us to move £4 million into the reserve and capital programme to support the flooding. I believe the services are working through what that could mean in terms of what that could deliver, but that was part of the current year underspend, and that was agreed by the executive before Christmas to move that into the programme.
Thank you. Can I just a quick, the 12 million has stayed in, hasn't it, and is collected in council tax now, because I think Councillor Clark was saying that the money wasn't still there, but to my knowledge it still is.
Yeah.
If
So
you could clarify.
We've backfilled the level of spending, so the level of spending on highways has remained constant and increased. What's reduced is the level of funding that we get for the DFT to support that.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, you want to come back?
Don't want to make this like a tennis match, but the point is the 12 million that was cut by the government hasn't been put back. And on the 4 million, all I wanted to know was, is 4 million going to be enough to stop, to support areas that get flooded? And by the sounds of it, it's just going to be put in as a support. It isn't going to cure the problem.
Michelle?
I think that the comment about we're not spending as much on highways, that the 12 million was put back, it just wasn't put back by the DFT. So that's as simple. Whether 4 million's enough, that's not a comment that I can make. Service officers, I'm assuming, can support that. It was highly debated at exec when we took the papers in January, so I don't doubt there'll be further discussion around the level of spend on flooding at the February exec and probably at council as well.
Okay, thank you. Have we any other questions or comments on that? I've got one that the report highlights the challenging economic environment with high levels of inflation. Could you provide more detailed information on how these inflationary pressures, particularly in contract and staffing costs, are factored into the proposed budget for highways and transport services? Additionally, how have the funding allocations from the local government settlement and other sources been adjusted to address these inflationary challenges?
So I think that the funding arrangements we've got from government covered inflation in terms of the revenue support grant, and other grants that they've provided to us has been reflected of current levels of inflation. The process we go through when we're setting budgets is we do quite a detailed piece of work, and we look at individual contracts, the larger contracts, to see what inflation we expect to be applied. Most of them are applied in retrospect, so we can get a good feel for what the level of budget is required, and that's been reflected in the highways maintenance contract particularly, and in the education transport levels. When inflation started to rise, we increased our contingency so that we could deal with in-year pressures of any inflationary and cost of service increases that we hadn't anticipated. And I've just mentioned the £9 million in contingency that we had in the current year's budget to support the education transport, and we're expecting all of that to be drawn down and transferred over to that budget. So I think the detailed work that we do alongside the use of contingency has supported us in that. I think the challenge for next year's budget was the national living wage increase that we hadn't anticipated being as high as it was, but the government grants do cover some of that, and obviously we're recommending the full amount of council tax to try and cover that as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Just another quick one then. The educational transport budget is a worry with the amount of money, with the inflation there, the amount of money we're having to put into there. How are future years being considered now? Contingencies for dealing with that going forward?
So we haven't got a specific contingency going forward for just transport. We had one for this year because there was still quite a lot of work going on around setting the correct level. I think it's fair to say it's not just inflation on education transport that's causing those increases, it's demand as well, and complexity of some of the requirements. I think there's quite a lot of work going on in that service area to try and understand and get a grip on some of the budget increases that we've seen over the last year, and you know, we're content that the £6 million in contingency that we've got going forward should be enough to cover our general challenges that should we have them, and the transport area as well.
Thank you. Have we any other comments on this? No. Right. I'll move on then to the to our proposals. I'm going to propose that our designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee, and I think there was a concern there from Councillor Clark, and I'm sure we all concur with that, on the money for flooding of highways, and are keen for the council to be able to put as much into that as possible, and take note of the fact that there are discussions going on about that. And so I move that the committee supports the proposed revenue and capital proposals 2024-25, and I ask that the comments raised by the committee be shared with the executive for its consideration ahead of the decision being made on the 6th of February. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stokes. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Stokes. We'll now take a vote on it. Will all those in favour please indicate? Thank you. Anyone against? Any Councillor Clark, you're abstaining. Nobody against, but one abstention. Thank you. Thank you for that. We'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the North Highcombe Relief Road Land Assembly preparation and highway matters. This pre-decision scrutiny report and associated appendices can be found on pages 23 to 42 of the agenda pack. This report seeks the executive's approval to undertake necessary preliminary steps, including pursuing a compulsory purchase order, CPO, and side roads order, SRO, as well as exercising specific powers under the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 to establish ownership and other land interests essential for the implementation of the North Highcombe Relief Road scheme. Additionally, approval is sought to engage in an agreement with National Highways to enable works on the A46 trunk road and exercise statutory powers needed for the successful delivery of the North Highcombe Relief Road. The report with its findings will be presented to the Executive on the 6th of February 2024. Our actions that are requested is that we're asked that we consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive as set out in the report, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Sam Edwards, Head of Highways Infrastructure and Laboratory Services.
Sorry, Chairman. You've got me today. I'm sitting in for Sam, who sends his apologies. He can't be here today.
Okay, then. Over to you.
I should perhaps introduce myself.
Yeah.
My name's Adam Lakin. I work for a company called Bentley, who were appointed by Lincolnshire to manage the North Highcombe Relief Road on behalf of the council. Sam, unfortunately, can't be here today. So I'm going to present the report, and I'll also send my apologies in advance that I can't answer any questions that aren't sort of directly related to the report. I'm sure you understand.
Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to sort of point out that this really is a preparatory report, in the sense that we need to take certain steps in order to be able to prepare for a compulsory purchase order, and also enter into certain agreements with National Highways in relation to the trunk road network. And whilst it might ordinarily be do this after planning, there is no reason why that shouldn't be the case. And what we're trying to do is sort of continue with the proactive way in which we've managed the scheme to date, and expedite all the steps that we can take. This, of course, will be subject to a further key decision, which will be the making of the actual order. So I should stress that this in no way sort of predetermines or prejudges the outcome of the planning permission that we're currently seeking. It's probably useful for this committee and members to understand the changes that were made since we came to executive previously for the planning decision. And the application has gone in substantially in the same form, and there have been a couple of very minor changes. So for awareness, they are the addition of a left turn facility at the existing facilities at the A46 roundabout, and some additional ecology mitigation measures that were necessary as a result of consultations and surveys. Everything else remained the same. I won't update you in terms of funding, in terms of costs, because they are the same, but members and this committee may also be interested to know that in October last year, the government published a paper called Network North, which essentially reallocated funding from the HS2, or the elements of HS2 that are not going to progress. And that should, we haven't yet got details, but that should increase the funding available for the project from central government. So the next step really, as I said, is to start to prepare this compulsory purchase order and side roads order. And of course, we've been updating our records as we go along. But the way in which a compulsory purchase order works is that we need to be able to comply with our statutory obligations, identify all people who have got a key interest in that land. And so what we're seeking to do is serve what's called a Section 16 notice, and that would be served upon all interested parties, and that would obligate them to provide certain information to us in order to be able to prepare that compulsory purchase order. I should stress that at the same time we're seeking authority to negotiate, and for those members that have perhaps been through this process before, you'll understand that that is actually a necessity of the CPO guidance, and of course it is something that this council will be seeking to do wherever possible. Because we're tying into that National Highways network, we need to enter into what's called a Section 6 agreement with National Highways. That enables us to undertake works on the highway network, their highway network, as though we were the highway authority. It gives us certain powers, so we're able to legally do that work. Members should be aware that there'll be, or likely be, a commuted sum that will be payable. In order to be able to keep to our programme, we're seeking delegated authority to enter into those agreements, which really are a matter of sort of legal processes and are based on standard agreements. In terms of the land assembly, we have provided in Appendix 2 a draft CPO map. I should stress that this is illustrative at this stage. It's based on our initial assessments, based on the planning application which we have submitted but is not yet determined, and on the initial land referencing that we have undertaken. And until we have got that final planning consent and undertaking the detailed land referencing shouldn't be taken as final. Similarly, for those that are interested, although it's a little bit more plain and simple to understand, it is the side roads order. That's shown in Appendix 3. Again, it is draft. We need to fully understand who has rights to certain lands in order to be able to understand what we can fully stop up and where we need to create new private means of access. And again, that's where our land referencing comes into play. So hopefully that sort of summarises the paper, and if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you for that, Alan. It's good news about the Network North and possibly additional funding coming through towards the project. Be interesting to know how much that might be, but I don't suppose we've got any indication of that yet, have we?
I'm not aware, unless anybody else, other officers in the room are, but I think we are in a slightly unusual situation in terms of the percentage allocation that was originally awarded at outline business case. So the outline information that was provided without any detail by the government doesn't quite fit with our situation. So we really are waiting for that detail to come for us to be able to fully understand it. But obviously felt it was important that the committee is aware of that.
Okay, thank you for that. Have we any questions from members? Councillor Clark.
As a general question, after watching the farce of the aftermath of HS2 and the compulsory land purchase that, left farms empty, houses empty, I was just wondering, how does the price of a land or a house come to? Is it estate agents, or is it the government that says this property is worth that much and this is what you're getting? Is it negotiable? What happens if the owner turns around and says, no, I don't want to move? Just, it's just a general question.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Alan.
Yeah, so I think that there's two elements to that. Obviously, what we would be seeking to do in the first instance is negotiate, and that would obviously be by agreement. If somebody doesn't want to move, then that is why it's a compulsory purchase order, and it is compulsory. There isn't any choice. It's important to know that if you're talking about residential properties, that actually all of the residential properties that are required for the scheme, bar one, have already been acquired by the county council. That remaining property that's not yet acquired is currently subject to a blight notice, so we're in the process of acquiring that. That's a notice that the landowner served on us. In terms of valuations, it's very much in a no scheme world. So it's what that property or land would be worth in the no scheme world. And the basis for that is that people should be no worse off and no better off as a result of the scheme. The only time that might be different is if a property was actively being marketed on the open market at the point in which we made the order and we were looking to acquire that land.
Thank you for that. Have we any other questions or queries? I've got one or two that just occurred to me. This work that's going on is going to be, it's a parallel process with the planning application, and that this is all preparatory work, and nothing sort of definite will be done until after the planning permission is determined. So just wanted to establish that. But we've carried out a lot of consultation with the public while all this scheme has been prepared, and we've seen in previous reports to this committee it's been indicated and brought out the amount of public consultation we've done. Have we, I presume most of these people, landowners, agents, etc., who've got land affected by this will be aware that this is coming along. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, Chairman. Yes, so we've engaged with all the major landowners. So there shouldn't be any sort of big surprises amongst the vast majority of people. What we will find as we go through this process is that there are many more people who may have an interest in the land, whether that be through some rights of access, way leaves, easements, etc. We're very unlikely to have engaged directly with those people at this moment in time, but you're absolutely right. We have done a huge amount of public consultation for this scheme, including 3 sort of public exhibition events. So I don't think it would be of a surprise to anybody in the local community.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Wright indicating now to speak. Richard.
Thank you, Chairman. I was waving. No, just a slight concern. That's all. Procedurally, I'm sorry I forgot the gentleman's name, but I'm just procedurally. I was a little bit. I'm glad you just said what you said, because there was words used like couldn't, shouldn't, when actually we're talking about allowing a decision to go through on something that is subject to a planning application. We have to be very careful about the wording. Procedurally, I've been doing scrutiny a long time, so normally somebody from outside of the officers would be a witness rather than presenting. So from an accountability point of view, and I'm not suggesting you're telling us any untruth, just that if this was examined, if somebody wanted to kick off about the planning application afterwards, I just wanted to say that I'm just a little concerned procedurally. We must make it very, very clear that the advice we've got this morning is not from an LCC officer, and that it's very subject to the planning permission. Words like couldn't and shouldn't be used, because planning, as you know, is quasi-judicial.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. That's why I was making the point when I did, because I thought it was important to bring that out. But thank you for reinforcing that. And yes, of course, we will make that clear in the minutes, and that is the basis on which any comments are going through forward from this committee today. Okay. There was just one other point I'd got, and it's the process that we're going through with National Highways, the Section 6 agreement, and how collaboratively is that done? Is it sort of fairly convivial, and they're sort of helpful towards the process? And you mentioned a commuted sum, which I wasn't quite sure what that was for. So if you could enlarge on that, please.
Yeah, certainly. So the process itself, which is the Section 6 agreement, is in a fairly standard form. We will receive that from National Highways, and there's not a huge amount that we're going to be able to change that. It's almost a take it or leave it sort of thing. I should point out it is something that the County Council has done on a number of occasions previously, so have experience in doing this, what they want out of the process and what we need to provide. So we're not expecting any surprises here. It's a tried and tested process. I think that already masks really what the question's all about, which is our relationship with National Highways, which at the moment is really positive. So we've had fantastic engagement with them through the design process and through the planning process, and they've recently submitted representations to the County Planning Authority, no objection to the scheme, and that really just demonstrates the good work that we've done with them thus far. So don't envisage that being a problem. But you know, that being said, it is a separate process. So again, just like Councillor Wright was talking about, this being a separate process to planning, it's the Section 6 again is a separate process to planning as well. In terms of the commuted sum, that is essentially the fact that we will be giving them a new asset, which after the works are completed, they need to maintain, because it's not going to the A46 roundabout is not part of Lincolnshire's local highway network. It's part of the strategic road network. The scheme makes that roundabout significantly larger and puts it signalises the junction, so there'll be traffic signals on each junction with the exception of middle lane, and that obviously takes maintenance. There's a negotiation there to be had in terms of what the value of that is, because obviously we'll be from the position that we're providing a better junction. Needless to say, they won't see it like that, but we will come to an amicable agreement. But essentially, it's to provide for the future maintenance of the asset.
Thank you for explaining that. Thank you. Right. Any other comments or questions? I'm going to move on then to the proposal, and I'm going to propose that our designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee. And I move that the committee supports the report and agree with the recommendations to the executive. And I ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the executive for its consideration ahead of the decision being made. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stokes has seconded. Thank you for that. Would all those in favour therefore please indicate? That is unanimous. Thank you for that. No abstentions or against. Right, we'll now move on then. That is carried. Get my page. Right, we'll move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is the Civil Parking Enforcement 2024 Contract and Notice Processing Solution. And this pre-decision scrutiny report was circulated as a supplementary pack on the 24th of January. The current civil parking enforcement contract, set to expire on the 3rd of November 2024, has reached its maximum duration as per the original procurement documentation. This report presents replacement options for the highway service and recommends a procurement process tailored to Lincolnshire County Council's needs. The report seeks approval from the Executive Councillor for Highways, Transport and IT to consider the information and endorse the recommended option as the foundation for establishing new arrangements to replace the expiring contract. The decision will be taken between the 8th and the 9th of February. The committee is invited to consider the report and determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillor as set out in the report, and that we agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillor in relation to this item. The report will be presented by Jonathan Evans, Head of Highways Client and Contractual Management Services, and Mick Phoenix, Traffic Manager. So over to you, Jonathan and Mick.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, it's going to be a double act today, if that's okay, but I'll run through some of the highlights of the report. So the County Council currently deals with approximately 44,000 penalty charge notices per annum. The service consists of a small client team of 3 council officers, along with a contracted out element of 4 notice processing officers and 25 civil parking enforcement officers. The current cost of the service is approximately 1.8 million per annum. So in terms of the work that we've done to date, the major phase of this work was the soft market testing. To help inform the discussion and the recommendations that we're making today, we put a notice out to the market and tried to make ourselves attractive and try and learn and get some dialogue going with those providers or potential providers out there. The purpose was to assess capability within the sector in terms of potential improvements in terms of service delivery, including technological advances made since 2016 when the last contract went out. And we also looked to see how alternative authorities were approaching pricing mechanisms within the market, just to try and make it the contractors beneficial and add that value for money that we're looking for. Feedback from those sessions focused mainly on sort of fundamental service delivery, especially the use of IT systems to gather intelligence and data to identify non-compliant streets. So we think that's potentially a shift in the future of where we're going to be going, instead of sort of a standard sort of a walked location across the busy areas of the network. We're going to be targeting a little bit more on a data-led perspective, and maybe we can talk around that in a bit more detail. One of the other main factors that linked to the sort of the budget update we had earlier was the pressure that national living wage puts on this service. A lot of the parking enforcement officers are at that lower threshold, and it's likely to lead to some sort of budget pressure in time. So that's something that we need to consider in the future. In terms of the dialogue, there was no consistent contract type that the sector preferred, and that supports some of the conversation and the recommendations we'll make later in this documentation. In terms of the procurement timelines, the key dates for this project are obviously getting the approval today to proceed with this procurement phase. We've got the contract award that we'd like to award by the 14th of June, and then a longish mobilisation period. That's to allow potential bidders to establish properties and ultimately get this service in place for the 4th of November. So in terms of the options appraisal, the options that we've got available to the County Council, they're broadly in 3 areas. The first one is fully outsource the service. So that's very similar to what we're doing now, rather than a very small statutory function that we fulfil in the Lincolnshire County Council. So that would be the on and off street enforcement and notice processing are fully outsourced. There's a proposal which is part of the recommendation here is to have a hybrid service. So that's the on and off street enforcement remains outsourced and the notice processing team would be transferred in-house. And then the alternative is a fully in-house model. So that's both on and off street enforcement and notice processing would be transferred in-house. So in terms of those 3 options available, the recommended position that we are presenting today is to tender both the on and off street enforcement with notice processing and the on and off street enforcement in isolation. So in essence, we're ruling out the fully in-house model at this stage. The contract that we'd like to put out to the market will utilise the new engineering contract, NEC4, option A, price contract. The main reason we're doing that is because the contractual team that are managing this service sit within a highway function, and what we'd like to do is have a bit more resilience there so that contract managers across the service can dip in and out if we've got an officer off sick or away from the service. Because at the moment, as it outlined in the start of this report, we've got 3 members of staff dealing with this day in, day out. In terms of the procurement, the way that we'd like to put it out to the market, we are proposing in terms of a most economical advantageous tender that we put out a 30% cost and a 70% quality assessment. We think the cost element is likely to be very competitive from those bidders, and we'd like to differentiate a bit more on that quality aspect of the service and make sure we're getting what's best for the members of the public. To encourage bidders to innovate and invest, the contract duration is proposed for an initial 5 years, followed by 2-year periods of a further 2 years, subject to performance, totaling a maximum term of 9 years. The reason to proceed with this recommendation is that it enables the Council to determine best value in relation to fully outsourced and the hybrid position that transfers the notice processing function in-house. Both options enable the Council to improve on the existing model that has been in place since 2012. So that concludes the update, and I would like to open it up for questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you for that report, Jonathan. I'm going to go straight to Councillor Ashton, who's already indicated. Over to you, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and grateful for the report. And from my perspective, can see very few issues with it. I'm just looking for assurance on one thing, and that's where appreciating that where we have the requirement to do enforcement, perhaps in offline locations, schools, and so on, where there's unlikely ever to be a case for a regular patrol, but occasionally as local members we get the call coming through saying we've got a bit of an issue here. I'm just looking for the assurance that whatever model we eventually decide to go for, that as part of this process we're making sure that we're building in the ability to be flexible and do that kind of enforcement, even if, as I say, it's not going to be particularly lucrative, but it's just a really essential function. And I am highlighting that you're mentioning on page 7 there the potential for the use of fixed point cameras to carry out some of these some of these functions. I appreciate in the past that we've experimented with mobile cameras, and the issue that I was just raising with those schools and those offline locations is that you get a bit of a reaction when someone's going down there, but for the other 300 and some odd days of the year, people go back to doing what they like. Is there likely to be the ability for either schools or local communities, and appreciating there are colleagues here, we come across it in planning committee, wherever there is a school and wherever there's parking regulations, there's usually a problem. For schools and communities to perhaps buy one of those cameras or help us buy one of those cameras, appreciating that we will probably be unlikely to be able to afford to put a camera where everyone would like a camera. And if communities are willing, not all of them are able, but if they are able and willing to bridge that gap, if that's something that we could look at encouraging, please.
Over to you. Is it Mick who's taking this? Over to you, Mick.
I shall take this. Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, on the side around using the IT and the information and a much more mobile workforce, we're hoping that coverage of areas that we know are non-compliant will improve. I wouldn't say it's bad at the moment with what the service is provided with, but we can make it better. So it's very much around there. On the second point about the fixed point cameras, again, we know there's about 33 schools now, I think, in Lincolnshire that have mandatory markings that can be enforced by a fixed point camera. I suspect over the next 9 years that number will continue to grow, and fixed point cameras offer us a solution that in the long term would probably end up being financially beneficial to the council, as opposed to trying to run 1 or 2 mobile camera cars plus the staffing costs. So we believe that's a good solution going forward. I would hope that when the bid goes out to the contractors, they will see this and will be able to come back to us with competitive bids for that part of the service. And again, it will build in towards the quality, because it's the kind of thing we want within the service going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Is Councillor Ashton, do you wish to come back on that? No, you're happy. Thank you, Mick. Got Councillor Stokes now who would like to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. No, I mean, I support Councillor Ashton on that. I do think the fixed cameras is the way forward. I think it'd be a deterrent there full time, and it would stop the problems that I have around my schools, especially in my division. But my other question relates to page 5 and the working with other districts and town councils. Obviously, with us going out for a new contract, are we having further discussions with the district councils we do not currently work with to bring them into the contract as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stokes. Mick.
Thank you, Councillor. We've obviously been in discussions with the districts that we currently work with, and also Skegness Town Council, because we look after one of their car parks for them as well. We have regular contact with councils, district councils, for which we don't provide a service. They get an update. We'll give them, we sent an email out and letters out to them last year telling them that the contract was due up. Are they happy with their position? Would they like to come on board in part of the managed service contract? Now, the managed service contract is at no cost to Lincolnshire County Council. So we will charge a management fee to look after those elements of work that they require us to look after. However, it's entirely up to them. It's whether they're comfortable with their own position or whether they would consider coming to us. They can do that through the life of the contract as well. It's not something they have to do from day one. There's flexibility.
Councillor Stokes, you want to go? Happy with that? Thank you. Councillor Ashley Morris, if you wish to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Briefly, and I'm sorry if this feels like Groundhog Day, we all have problems, or I would say most of us have problems with schools, parent parking, etc., which Councillor Ashton covered. At the moment, if a school, and I mean, I rather get the impression that in the particular area I'm sort of battling with at the moment, if we don't provide machine guns, they're going to want something. And allowing for the fact that I feel that's a bit of a far one, if a camera was applied for, would that be now actually at the moment a possibility? Or are we, or is this something in the future? Because it would be awfully handy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Right now, it would to be able to provide the cameras to put them into place presently would cause us to renegotiate with our current supplier. By the time that's finished, we're probably into the new contract. However, if we've built it in as part of the new contract, then we have that flexibility on siting and costs, and having it as part of the actual finance model that goes round civil parking.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Paula. Right, have we got any other? Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Completely agree with all the speakers. The problems outside the schools. They mentioned the fact that the living wage is paid to the wardens who go round, ticketing. If you stand there and see the abuse they receive of people, they deserve to be paid a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you, for Councillor Clark, for that. Any other comments, questions? No. I think we can see from this that a focus on enforcement outside of schools is something that everybody seeing, members of the committee are sort of focusing in on, and if that can be given some particular priority in the when looking at the contract, that would be really good. I think we would all like to see better enforcement outside of schools. And Jonathan, you want to come in there?
Yeah, it was just to bring together the theme really of those conversations. The contract that we're putting out is flexible to deploy enforcement officers, whether that's a fixed camera or people on the ground, wherever we want really. Ultimately, there's a discussion around sort of the income that generates to make sure it's not sort of a truly loss making. But as a service, as a council, we have that ability to and put funds in ultimately to do more in these locations, and that's probably a discussion for maybe later the next time we return. Separate to this decision about just the procurement, but maybe there's a further discussion around the civil parking enforcement in general about where the priorities are.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. Just one more quick comment from me. I mean, you mentioned utilising electronic vehicles, bikes, etc., and how these modes of I was just wondering how these modes of transport will contribute to the efficiency of the service, and is there any cost to Lincolnshire County Council in bringing those vehicles in, or is the cost of those with the provider of the service, the enforcement service?
Hey, Councillor. Yes, the cost for the vehicles will probably be built into the contract. It will be a provision cost within there, but clearly identified and monitored as the contract goes on, so that if we find that the cost will become onerous, we can ask for that to be re-evaluated. So there's checks and balances on that. The idea of using the vehicles, they're cleaner, helps with the council's carbon footprint. We're trying to enforce outside schools to reduce harmful emissions, therefore using EV vehicles helps towards that. It also allows us to deploy staff much quicker than we currently can. At the moment there's 1 or 2 vehicles and they're used to take 2 or 3 or 4 officers around Lincoln, and they're dropped off and then the vehicle goes back to the depot. We want to break away from that. We want to be able to move the officers very, very quickly, so that when we get reports of non-compliant parking or problems, that we can move the officers there extremely quickly within, I can't promise an exact amount of time, but we're talking hours or an hour instead of days under the current reporting system. That's how long it takes to get a response back. So it speeds the whole process up, and it should help with those things that we're doing this for, which is the traffic flow, reducing the congestion.
So just to be clear on that, it is built into the contract, so the whoever wins the contract provides the vehicles and electric bikes, etc. So it would be up to them to come in with a bid which includes that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you. Right, no one else indicating to speak, so I'm going to move on to the proposal, and I'm going to propose that our designated scrutiny officer records the key findings and comments raised by the committee, and I move that the committee supports the report and agrees with the recommendations to the Executive Councillor, and I ask that the comments raised by this committee be shared with the Executive Councillor for his consideration ahead of the decision being made. Have I a seconder for that? Councillor Ashley Morris, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Ashley Morris. Could all of those in favour please indicate? That is unanimous, so and that is carried. So we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Winter Service Interim Report. The Scrutiny report is found on pages 43 to 48 of the agenda pack, and this report provides an interim update on the annual Winter Service Plan that was considered by this committee on the 17th of July 2023. And our actions, the committee is asked to consider and comment on the interim report and recommend any changes or actions to the executive members for highway, transport and IT. And Jonathan, it's Claire going to present the report. Thank you. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. So for background information, we brought the Winter Service Plan as an Executive Councillor decision in July 2023, where we discussed at this Highways and Transport Scrutiny Committee. So Lincolnshire County Council carries out precautionary salting and snow clearance treatments on the carriageway and footway in accordance with the Winter Service Plan across the county. And the operation prioritises somewhere in the region of 3,000 kilometres of the Lincolnshire road network, and the precautionary salting network includes the strategic A, B and the links between county's main villages, links between NHS hospitals and treats within at least 500 metres of all the primary and secondary schools wherever possible, and also links between all railway and bus stations. So the authority has the capability of calling on 43 gritters strategically placed around the county and 4 spare which are utilised as backups. The Winter Service Plan outlines that a minimum of 25,000 tonnes of salt should be in stock at the start of the winter service, with a minimum of 15,000 tonnes available at any time throughout the season. Lincolnshire County Council continue to use treated salts for the 23-24 season, and we have completely moved away from the use of the pre-wetted system. The withdrawal of the old pre-wet system has meant that the brine making equipment in the depots is now redundant, and the first system has been removed from the Sturton depot last year, and the facility at Pothole was taken out over the summer. Willingham Hall is scheduled to be taken out early this year, and a further 3 systems will need to be removed from the county after Willingham is disposed of. So in terms of the interim update, the data is correct up to the time of drafting the report, which was the 10th of January, but I'm also joined today by Darryl Redford, the Network Resilience Manager, and he can provide more updated figures from up to the weekend. So at the start of the season, there were just under 29,300 tonnes of salt available across the county. At the time of writing, there were just over 24,100 tonnes remaining. A mid-season restock took place at some of the smaller depots, with 600 tonnes being delivered to Sturton just before Christmas, and salt will be monitored and further decision on restock will be driven by weather and usage. Based on current usage rates, further deliveries will be arranged over the summer to restock above the 25,000 tonne minimum. Last winter, the authority carried out 68 salting turnouts and utilised approximately 18,500 tonnes of salt. There were no snow days where severe weather routes were run. So far this season, we have carried out 23 precautionary salting runs using 5,777 tonnes of salt up to the 10th of January. At this interim point, as a result of mild start to the winter, with October and early November being the mildest for some times, late November and early December saw a 6-day cold spell between the 28th of November and the 3rd of December, which accounts for most of the runs this season. A mild wet spell took place over the festive period and into the new year, with weather turning cold again on the 6th of January. A snow run where the ploughs were used is included in this run, and a detailed breakdown of the winter service statistics to date are attached at Appendix A on page 47 of the report pack. You'll see that there is one anomaly in Appendix A where we did a full run on the 14th of December, but temperatures were 0.6. This was down to a poor forecast which predicted temperatures would drop to around minus 0.2. However, slow-moving cloud cover meant that temperatures stayed mild. During the winter season, the Highway Service has provided 5 new grit bins and replaced 6 so far. We have received 185 requests to refill, mainly after the recent snow and cold weather of late November and early December. 1 tonne salt bags continue to be issued to the parish councils on request for this season. This is due to the mild winter last year, where it was considered that most bags would not have been used, and therefore we would only deliver by exception. We've only received a couple of requests on this matter. However, we've done this for the last 2 years due to the mild weather, so we feel that it's prudent that a full request and refill of bags is completed over the summer. There have been 13 requests for additional roads to be added to the precautionary salting network so far this season, and as per the winter service plan, these will be reviewed by the network resilience team over the summer. 13 gritters were introduced into the fleet for October 2023, replacing vehicles which had reached the end of their life. Those vehicles were purchased outright rather than leased, which provided a significant long-term cost saving. The shift to brown salt meant these vehicles were procured at a reduced price due to a reduced requirement of brine tanks and associated systems. Transport Connect Limited, so Lincolnshire County Council's transport maintenance provider, took over the complete maintenance of the fleet in 2023, and they have recently expanded the service with an additional depot based in Lincoln, which opened early last year. This has eased some of the fleet repair pressures and capacity of the service, plus it means the fleet in the north of the county does not have far to travel for the maintenance. Just some points to raise on the route review. So just to highlight to the committee some of the good work which we are doing with route optimisation analysis, and this is to explore further efficiencies within the highway service. The last time we carried out a detailed review like this was back in 2005, with only minor modifications made ever since. So the Network Resilience team have uploaded our precautionary salting network, and we've looked at this data and analysed different scenarios. The issues we considered are depot locations across the county, runtimes and capacity. And we've also just completed a review of over 3,000 kilometres of the network and 43 routes, where we have looked to maximise the amount of salting time on each of these routes individually, because the greater time of salting these routes as opposed to driving is a much more efficient way of doing things. This review also allowed us to carry out a complex study of the routes that we salt and cross-check these against our policy document. And I'll hand over to Jonathan shortly, who will go into a little bit more detail on that. But just for the purposes of this report, the committee has been asked to consider and comment on the interim report and recommend any changes or actions. Hand over to
Thank you for that, Claire. Thank you. Yes, over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, the bit that I just wanted to talk through was this route optimisation analysis we've been doing. What we're trying to do here is ultimately get our precautionary salting network in the right areas of the network in terms of a risk-based solution. We've done a lot of work, as Claire suggests there, looking at the optimising our existing routes. But when we start to consider depot location and potentially rewording or looking at our policy, we just want to make sure that we've got the best model in place ultimately. And potentially it's one for the Scrutiny Committee to engage maybe in that process. We're likely to be working on it heavily over this summer period now, but we're looking to implement probably for winter 2026. So that's 18 months away now. We just want to make sure that individually as councillors we're going to engage with everyone, but we obviously need that overview. So it's those sort of wider look at the service, and it would be really nice for maybe the Scrutiny to get involved with that process. One final handover, so it's to Darryl Redford, just to give you the latest data on salting that we've completed from the 10th to over the weekend.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yes, Darryl.
Hello there, councillors. Just an update. That cold period that started on the 6th of January was quite severe, and so has had a quite considerable amount to the statistics. Just to give you an up-to-date run now, we've done 38 complete runs. Individually, that's 1,585 individual gritters going out and doing their runs over the course of the winter so far, using 9,650 tonnes, leaving us just over 20,500 tonnes in stock. We are restocking at the moment, looking at our Sturton depot and Podol depot, and there's 2,000 tonnes just going in there at the moment just to top up those depots, because they're a little bit the barns are a little bit smaller than the other barns in the county, so they always need restocking in this middle section of the winter. So just to give you an idea, that period of cold weather that we had just after Storm Henk was quite significant. Thank you.
I'll move on to members now. Councillor Ashton has indicated to speak.
Thank you. Could you possibly give me a little bit more information around the criteria against which requests for additional roads being added to the Colton network, how that criteria works, and what the chances are of any of those requests being actioned? My reason for raising that, I mean, we all know of effectively secondary route rat runs that are often incredibly busy but sometimes don't get picked up in the precautionary salting, and appreciating we'll never, of course, have enough money to do every road that everyone thinks ought to be gritted. But I'm thinking in the south of the county, there's roads like King Street down between Bourne and the Deepings there, which you get a lot of traffic going down there in rush hour, and I don't think that's one that's on the network, and I'm sure we've all got them in our own divisions. We can all think of one. I'm just wondering what that criteria is, how that stacks up, and where the dial sets on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, over to Jonathan. I think, is it Jonathan or Darryl? Darryl's going to take it.
I'll take that answer if you don't mind. I appreciate what you're saying there. Obviously, I'd love to fit as many roads onto the network as possible. It keeps me very busy, but unfortunately, we can't fit everything on. And you're right, King Street is one of the routes that is not salted, but it is a significant route. I think one of the things we need to understand is the capacity of our fleet. It is capacity, so adding things on is very difficult, and this is why we're looking at route optimisation. Are we looking at the right routes, and are we hitting the right roads initially anyway? So that's something for the future, and that's why that piece of work is being undertaken. At the moment, in the winter service plan, there is a request form that we go through, that officers go through how to score things. But obviously, it is down to initial capacity, and if that gritter has no capacity, I can't add a route without taking a route off. And unfortunately, our fleet is getting very close to that level. But it looks at if there is capacity, it looks at usage for vehicles, how many vehicles are using the road, and then physical features such as deep ditches, bends. Is it covered? Is it in the shade? Is there dips? And we score accordingly, and the highest scores can be added over the season. We have added a few routes over the years, but as I say, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to do that.
Thank you, Darryl. Councillor Ashton, you wish to come back on that or no? I mean, just on that, what concerns me is the routes that might be proposed to come out if we're looking at routes that perhaps don't fit in with the current policy, and the consultation with members on that, because I think it's really important if we're going to be proposing to take routes out that we have a good reason for it, and that the local member is consulted on it at an early stage, not when it's more or less a decision made and a discussion about the whys and wherefores of that. So I think the suggestion that you made about this committee getting involved with the route optimisation is, I'm sure that we would be keen to do that. I'm not looking at any member shaking their head, so I think we'll capture that and say that we would like to do that. I'll move on anyway. Thank you for Councillor Ashton does want to come back now. Thank you, Councillor Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was indicating I'm quite happy to come back a little bit later. I was just wondering whether we could have an estimate. What is the cost of a gritter and the team to run it? Because I'm again appreciating your answers that you're at absolute capacity and can't take on any more. And if there are members that are thinking maybe we ought to do more, I think it'd be useful as members to have a rough idea what that would cost and how feasible that would be. Again, just to appreciate the realities of where we're at and what we can do, and if we are not just at the limits of what your team can do, but at the limits of what we could afford to do as an authority as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, I think we probably need to bring you back some more information there about the modelling and how it looks. I did don't want to set sort of hairs running, but we think initially the optimization just on our precautionary salting network, we can do more network with the resource that we currently have. So there is some capacity there once we change the routes. And then as part of the optimization process, we are looking at sort of our strategic depot locations in time, and obviously then that reinforces that optimization process. And at the same time, we'd like to have that discussion with councillors about the actual policy criteria of which network parts have changed over time. The last time we did this was probably 15, 20 years ago. There's some villages in Lincolnshire that population has remained static, and there's some that have dramatically changed. So in terms of that risk-based approach, the needs of of what is a risk-based solution has changed dramatically, and it'd be really nice to discuss that openly with councillors. Obviously, as you say, we'll be doing that individually with every affected councillors, but as an overview, it would be good to have that support, because it's sort of just trying to get that balance of all those needs there.
Thank you, Jonathan. Have we any other questions? Well, I'm sort of concerned about these 1 tonne bags of grit that go out to parish councils, and communicating with the parish councils in plenty of time, because I know it says in the report that we didn't do anything this year because it was mild the year before. But in my experience, if you don't contact a parish, prior to the winter, they don't always think about their 1 tonne bag of grit until we've got the bad weather, and then suddenly say, we haven't got our 1 tonne bag of grit, and how are we going to and so you've got them coming forward then wanting the grit quickly, which causes problems. So I think at least some communication ought to go out to the parishes every year in plenty of time, saying, even if we don't propose to we don't propose to be dishing out the 1 tonne bags of grit to everybody this year, because it was a mild year last year, so we think you should have plenty left, and give them the opportunity to come back. And so I feel that we perhaps could have done that better this year. Darryl, I see you.
I appreciate your comments, Councillor. I take them on board. It's a big operation, obviously, and if it's not necessary to issue the bags, then that's great, but obviously it's quite easy to check. So it's probably more prudent to check than assume. So yes, I'll take those comments on board, and we'll do that moving forward.
Thank you, Darryl. Thanks for that. Any other comments? No. I'm going to move on then to the proposal, and I'm going to move that the report be received and request that our comments and suggestions made in relation to the updates we received today are taken under consideration by the relevant officers and the executive portfolio holder. Does anyone dissent? If so, indicate no. No? Everybody's in agreement? That's agreed then. So I'll move on. And thank you all for that report and the contributions to that report. Thank you. So we come to the final item on the agenda, which is the committee work programme. And this item is on pages 49 to 56 of the agenda pack. This item enables the committee to comment on the content of its works programme. The report will be presented by Chiara, our Scrutiny Officer, and our actions are to receive the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which could be included for consideration in the work programme. And I'll hand over to Chiara now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I'm pleased to confirm that there haven't been any major changes on the report that members have in their packs. We've got an addition. So for our April meeting, there's a pre-decision scrutiny report on the bus service improvement plan and Network North funding that has been added to the agenda. And this report will provide detailed account of our spending plans included in the bus service improvement plan, and the information will also be shared with the Department for Transport by June 2024 as requested. Other than that, There's no other changes, but I welcome any additions or suggestions for other items that members would like to see included in our work programme for the rest of the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chiara. Have any members got any comments on that? No? No? So thank you. So I'll move then that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 49 to 56. Does anyone dissent? And if so, please indicate no. No dissensions. So that's agreed then. Right, I bring the meeting to a close then. I'd like to thank everyone, all the officers for the reports and assistance in the meeting, and members for their contributions. Thank you everyone, and a safe journey back to wherever you're going. Thank you.